All right, let's get going. Everybody hear me just fine? I'm guessing the internet's fine too, so we can go. We're good to go. A third. Today's the second month. What's the third month? Okay. All right. All right, let's get started. Violence redirected. The people have the time to see that the liberation has been the business of each and all, and that the leader has no special merit. When the people have taken violent part of the when the people have taken violent part in the national liberation, they will allow no one to set themselves up as liberators. They show themselves to be jealous of the results of their action and take good care not to place their future, their destiny, or their fate of other countries in the hands of a living God. Yesterday, they were completely irresponsible. Today, we mean to understand everything and make all decisions. Illuminated by violence and consciousness of the people, rebels against the pacification. From now on, the demagogues of the opportunists and the magicians have a difficult time. The action which has thrown them into a hand-to-hand struggle coffers upon the masses and vicarious taste for the concrete. The attempt to mystification becomes, in the long run, practically impossible because they have already. Okay, that makes sense. All right, cool. Living a live reading session from a book on direct. Here we see the ideal result, the quote, true colonization. Read it again carefully. Center your meditation upon the consciousness of the people, and they mean to understand everything and make all decisions. And it never hurts to lay stress again upon the concept of violence that we're using, i.e., it relates to all aspects and levels of struggle, all areas of social life, and the development of the people's consciousness, resting on their active participation in all areas of struggle. Keep in mind, it's not the mere use of arms by the masses that ensures that they become responsible, want to know everything, and make all decisions, including these decisions that dictate that they remain armed after independence is won. However, the ideal outcome is not always what we get. Below, we'll see that 1. The people's violence is redirected, but it begins as a spontaneous process. It strengthens its strength is that it's voluntary, and its weakness is that it lacks coherence and deliberation. 2. It should be a violence that leads the people that leads to the people assuming total responsibility for the struggle and to their becoming fully conscious new people. I'll make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, where's the next thing at? Where was it? Oh, okay, I see where it's at. Okay. 3. However, the weakness of spontaneity also means that people are restrained and not enlightened. Independence becomes a farce, and a new struggle begins, now against neocolonialism, and more directly, a struggle for socialism. Fanon tells us that, quote, will before the political or fighting phase of the national movement, the people rebuild their perception. And we'll go to what he says. We might in the same way seek to find in dancing, singing, and traditional rites and ceremonies the same upward spiraling trend, and make out the same changes and the same impatience in this field. Well, before the political or fighting phase of national movement, an attentive spectator can thus feel and see the manifestation of new vigor and feel the approaching conflict. You will note unusually unusual forms of expression and themes which are fresh and imbued with power, which is no longer that an invocation, but rather that the assembling of the people, summoning together for a precise purpose. Everything works together to awaken the natives' sensibility and to make unreal the unacceptable and contemplative attitude or the acceptance of defeat. The native rebuilds his perception because he renews the purpose and dynamism of the craftsman of dancing and music and of literature and the oral traditions. His world comes to lose its accursed character. The condition necessary for inevitable conflict are brought together. Let's go back into the reading. These should be understood as perceptions regarding the world, the settler, the colonialism, and most importantly, the people's self-perception. How does the colonized people, how do we come to make the decisions to begin the decolonization process, to develop and practice a program of revolutionary violence? The fighting phase begins only after the moment we decide to embody history in our own persons. And I'm going to read another part. The violence which was ruled over the ordering of colonial world, which has ceaselessly drummed the rhythm for the destruction of native social forms and broken up without reserve the system of reference of the economy. The customs of dress and internal and external life, that same violence will be claimed and taken over by the native at the moment when, deciding to embody history in his own persons, he surges into the forbidden quarters. To wreck the colonial world is, henceforward, a mental picture of action which is very clear, very easy to understand, and which may be assumed by each one of the individuals which constitute the colonized people. To break up the colonial world does not mean that after the frontier have been abolished, lines of communication will be set up between the two zones. The destruction of the colonial world is no more and no less than the abolition of one zone, its burial in the depths of the earth, or its expulsion from the country. All right, here we go, back up. Let me find where I was at. There it is. The decolonization process begins only after the moment we realize our humanity and then begin to sharpen our weapon. The process of revolutionary violence begins only after we vomit up bourgeois Western values, and only after we discover that our lives, our breath, our beating hearts are the same as those of the settler, and that his skin is of no more value than ours. And this discovery shakes the world in a very necessary manner. All the new revolutionary assurance stems from it. My emphasis. Before and in order that the fighting phase may begin, the people must begin to rebuild their perceptions of themselves and the social environment within which they live. They must rebuild their perceptions of the world, a world now dominated by capitalism and struggle against it. It's simple, about the people's asserting their new identity, asserting a form or concept of humanity that's distinct from that form or concept established by the colonial order and imposed upon the colonized, i.e., IG. They say they're human and that we aren't, that if we want to become human, we must be like them, exploiters and oppressors and individuals. Yet the more we become like them, i.e., the more bourgeois we become, the more inhumane, and inhumane we become, the more I don't know how to say another word for, can you help me? Are you reading along? It's insane, which I know is bad. What's a different word? Anybody? Wild, thank you. We become the more we become alienated from ourselves. During the colonial period, the so-called peaceful period, the people react to being hemmed in by dreaming of actions, achieving freedom from 9 in the evening until 6 in the morning. During the peaceful period, when colonialism is in power and secure, it's rather difficult to notice any widespread fundamental change in the self-perception of the people. During the colonial period, the oppressive system keeps alive in us an anger which generally finds no external outlet, but rather takes the form of internally directed violence in various forms, e.g., quote, the N-words beat each other up, and the police and courts do not know which way to turn when faced with the astonishing wave of crime, end quote. Our, quote, muscular tension finds outlets in bloodthirsty expulsion, in tribal warfare, in feuds between sects, and quarrels between individuals. And here we're going to read something here. It's probably from Fanon. Very sad because he's not allowed me to join. I'm not allowing you to join? What? I did let you join. Here. I don't understand. Huh. Okay. A positive negation of common sense is evident. While the settler or the policeman has the right to live long day, to strike the native, to insult him or her, and to make him or her crawl to them. You will see the native reaching for his or her knife or gun at the slightest hostile or aggressive glance cast on him or her by another native. By throwing themselves with all their force into the vendetta, the native tries to persuade him or herself that colonialism does not exist, that everything is going on as before, the conquest, that history, sovereign existence continues. During the colonial period, back to the text. Yeah, I don't see them in the request either. I'd sent them an invite, but they didn't come up. During the colonial period, the mass of the people exercised violence through what Fanon describes as, quote, behavioral patterns of avoidance, which are used to, quote, bypass the settler. These include a belief in fatality, I can't say the damn word. I'm gonna go look it up. Fatality, thank you. Which removes, and now that I have my thing, I can use my pad now. Yay. Instead of having to go look for it. There we go. Oops. Get this part real quick. There you go. Okay. During the colonial period, the mass of the people exercised violence through what Fanon describes as behavioral patterns of avoidance, which are used to bypass the settler. These include the belief of finality. You said it, which fatality, which removes all blame from the oppressive system, and attributes all misfortunes and colonial violence to the fate or to God, myths, spirits, and magical metaphysical superstructures, which creates, quote, a world of prohibition, of barriers, and of inhibition for more terrifying than the world of the settler. Exorcism, dance, eroticism, dance, and seances, seances, all of those forms of avoidance or internally directed violence allowed, quote, the most accurate aggressivity and the most impelling violence to be canalized, transformed, and conjured away. On the other hand, while the masses exercise their violence through these patterns of avoidance, the violence of the elite assumes other forms, i.e., the native intellectual has clothed his aggressiveness in his barely veiled desire to assimilate himself into the colonial world. He has used his aggressiveness to serve his own individual interests. As we read about this canalized violence, we should make an effort to uncover the forms of avoidance that are peculiar to us. Most of us read Wretched and fail to make the connection between colonial situation that he describes and the one that we are subject to. Don't we exercise our aggressiveness against ourselves? Don't we witness bloodthirsty expulsions in the form of gang warfare and black on black crime, supposedly? It's a question mark. He doesn't believe in that. On the individuals and the collective levels, don't we evidence a positive negation of common sense as we too try to persuade ourselves that colonialism and capitalism, exploitation and alienation don't exist? Don't we too grab hold of the belief in finality? I can't say the damn word. Fatality. I can't say it. Can you say it, please, again? Okay, never mind. We'll look it up.
Can you hear me? It's
Yep.
fatality.
Fatality. Thank you. I keep messing it up. Very common among young people these days.
Very common.
Very common among young people these days. And what about our myths, spirits, and magical metaphysical superstructure? In our context, we employ conspiracy theories and zodiac and numerology. Kanti clothed the phrase from ancient languages. Yeah. He invoked the power of a diet and a taboo of certain animals as food products. Without a doubt, we have our own prohibition and inhibition that we use to avoid a confrontation with the reality of colonial violence. Our own barriers that we use to avoid delink from the colonial world. So we come back to the question, how do we begin to rebuild our perceptions? How do we come to make the decision to engage and the decolonization process? How and why do we begin to redirect our violence? How do we become to make the decision to embody history? How do we realize our humanity again? It's only after we do this that the fighting phase begins. And yet Fanon says that it's during the struggle for freedom that a marked alienation from the pattern of avoidance is observed. It's during the struggle that we come face to face with colonialism, discover realities, and transform it into a pattern of new customs and into a practice of revolutionary violence. But how does this happen? It happens under the influence. It happens under the influence of internal and external factors, under the influence of change and changing objective and subjective conditions, under the influence of class forces inside and outside the structure of the people. Most of all, it happens more or less spontaneously. One thing we must always keep in mind, one thing that Fanon and Cabral and so many others take pains to remind us. The people are the nation, and they maintain the national culture and identity distinct from that of the oppressor, even when the oppressor appears, quote, in power and secure, end quote. And the period appears, quote, peaceful, simply because the people don't see the viable alternative. But we never know when or in what form of alternative will make itself apparent and make the shift to qualitative change, the leap to the beginning of a new stage. However, when that situation emerges spontaneously, the task will be to change the spontaneous character and give the movement conscious and comprehensive direction under the leadership of the people and the revolutionary or proletarian class stand. At, at Fanon says, quote, now the problem is to lay hold of this violence which is changing directions when formerly it was appeased by myths and exercised its talents in finding fresh ways of committing mass suicide. Now, new conditions will make possible a completely new line of action. End quote. He used somewhat different language to pose the same problem. It says, Fanon asked, quote, what are the class forces which in the colonial period opened up new outlets and engendered new aims for violence of colonized people? Here is how Fanon frames the examination. See what it says. It says, discuss the concept of faith fatality in the context of colonial violence. Here's Fanon. Nowadays, a theoretical problem of prime importance is being set on the historical plane as well as on the level of political tactics by the liberation of colonies. When can one affirm that the situation is ripe for the movement of national liberation? In what form should it first be manifested? Because the various means whereby decolonization has been carried out have appeared in many different aspects. Reason hesitates and refuses to say which is true decolonization and which is false. We shall see that for a man who is in the thick of the fight, it is an urgent matter to decide on the means and tactics to employ. That is to say, how to conduct and organize the movement. It is coherence. If this coherence is present, there is only a blind will towards freedom with the terrible reactionary task which it entails. Let's stop here for a bit of orientation. 1. In a sense, the remaining chapter of Wretched are, quote, previewed in this first chapter. All of the themes are introduced and briefly treated there. That is, in this first chapter, we encounter discussions of spontaneity, national consciousness, culture, and mental disorders. We encounter discussions of racism and class struggle. How could it be otherwise if we recall our concept of revolutionary violence and decolonization? The first chapter provides an overview of all elements of both colonialism and anti-colonialism. If we confine ourselves to one theme, violence is the concern of the first chapter, but it's also the concern of the second chapter. 2. As we search for answers to the questions I've raised in this section, and as we focus particularly upon a brief examination of the new condition and the class forces that open new outlets and create new aims for the people's violence, we're going to encounter overlapping themes, i.e. spontaneity and class struggle. We're going to take up the theme of class struggle in part 3. So here I want to concentrate on theme of spontaneity. It's the spontaneity of violence that's at issue. The strengths and weaknesses of a spontaneity that tends to characterize the beginning of people's struggles, and which, if not overcome, result in their failures, i.e. the failures to achieve true decolonization. 3. Who's in here? Okay. 3. Now let's go forward by going back to nowadays a theoretical problem of prime importance is being set break it down just a bit and look for points that will help you orient us as we proceed. A. National liberation revolutions have given rise to theoretical problems on the historical plane and on the level of political tactics. B. How do we undermine, rather or not, a revolutionary situation, whether or not a revolutionary situation exists within a colonial context? C. What forms, i.e., political, economic, cultural, or military, are assumed by the first manifestation of the qualitative shift from the colonial to the anti-colonial period? And D. We've witnessed many national liberation struggles and the rising of many flags over newly independent nations. How do we determine which, if any, of these independent nations were or are truly decolonized, i.e., rather new people have arisen and assumed collective mastery over the truly liberated society? And C. How do people still suffer the capitalist colonialist yoke? Answer all of the above questions and decide upon the means and tactics to conduct and organize the revolutionary process. More to the point, how do we develop a coherent program, one that will allow them to avoid a mere blind will towards freedom, i.e., avoid the weaknesses of spontaneity, and thus also to avoid the terribly reactionary risks, i.e., neocolonialism, which the absence of coherence and the presence of spontaneity entail? So spontaneity needs to be more put to more of a theoretical line in practice. So it has to develop from spontaneity into a more form of organization. Yeah, we're still talking about how and why the people come to redirect their violence, but these questions lead into a discussion of new conditions, a class forces, which in their turn lead to discussions of the need for coherence and to overcome or avoid spontaneity, i.e., to avoid or overcome a mere blind will towards freedom and its terrible consequences. Are we good? Because I'm moving on to another section. Are we good? Have any questions? Anybody? Give it a few minutes. See if anybody has any questions.
I do not. Sorry, was trying to take some meds.
It's okay.
Lynn says check the text they sent you.
Okay. 4F, spontaneity and the need for a coherent program. You turn to the second chapter and say, I've read about violence. Now I'll read about spontaneity. Well, Fanon first raised the issue of spontaneity in the first chapter, and he's still talking about violence in the second chapter. For example, he tells us that people want and need things explained to them. They are glad to understand the line of argument, and they like to see where they are going. He then points out that, quote, at the beginning of his association with the people, the native intellectual overstresses details, end quote, and, quote, carried away by the multitudinous. I can't say this word.
Multitudinous.
We're gonna look it up. Is that okay?
Yeah, I know what it means. It means multiple of plenty. It's like multitudes, but it's instead of multitudes, it's like multitudinous.
It won't let me say it, fucker. Multitudinous describes things that exist in or consist of a great number or essentially very many. Yeah, yeah. Multitudinous aspects of the fight. He tends to concentrate on local tasks and, quote, fails to see the whole of the movement all the time. He is occupied in action on a particular front and loses sight of the unity of the movement, end quote. Now compare the above from the chapter on violence with the lines from the chapter of spontaneity. The elite will attach a fundamental importance of organization, so much so that the fetish of organization will often take precedence over a reasoned, studied colonial society. Fanon explains that, quote, during this period of spontaneity is king and initiatives is localized. We are dealing with a strategy of immediacy, and in which the aim and program of each locally constituted group is local liberation. If the nation is everywhere, then she is here. She is here. One step further, and only here is she to be found. Tactics are mistaken for strategy. The art of politics is simply transformed into the art of war. As you begin to read the second chapter, notice that Fanon opens it on the subject of difference of rhythm between the so-called leaders and the mass of the people. You know me. I went to the dictionary to see if I could get a better grip on rhythm, and I did, basing it on, quote, an ordered recurrent alteration in the flow of that relates to forward movement, the aspect comprising all the elements that relate to forward movement marked by regular reoccurrence of related elements, effect created by the elements that relate to development. So he's talking about the forward movement, the rhythm, and the leaders. Yeah, need to be okay. You all have to pardon me if I am a bit slow or seem to take unusual and extended routes to point that you reach. Okay. To point, extend routes to points. Why did you drop? Oh my God, I'm not dealing with this. Routes to point that you reach in more conventional and timely ways. What's up?
Lynn tried to tell you.
Ugh. To some of us, it's not immediately clear that a difference of rhythm implies difference in class consciousness, interests and tactics, ways and means of conducting and organizing the movement, identity, purpose, and direction, true from false decolonization, blind will, and coherence. A difference of rhythm means that the elements are unrelated, like another way of saying class contradiction or contradictions between ideological worldview. Next, notice how Fanon points out the distinctions between those who want an immediate bettering and their lot, and those who want to, quote, limit and restrain the former. Now, a better lot doesn't just mean saying a higher wage. It also means the all-around development of the person people, where then shown that the politically informed person under colonial domination is one who knows that a local conflict is not a decisive settlement between the people and the system of colonialism, No doubt someone is asking, what does all this have to do with spontaneity? True, to form, I went to the dictionary and to the thesaurus to check the word spontaneity, and I began to work with, quote, the equality or state of being spontaneous, voluntary, or undermined action or movement. When I check spontaneous, I focus on one, proceeding from neutral feeling, or native tendencies without external constraint. Two, arising from momentary impulse. Three, controlled and directed internally, self acting. Four, not apparently contrived or manipulated. End quote. Synonymous are impulsive, haphazard, instinctive, autonomous, are studied and deliberate.
Antonyms. Those are antonyms.
Antonyms are
Synonyms and
studied
antonyms.
and and deliberate. Thank you. The share meaning element and of the synonymous
Synonyms.
is acting or active activated without deliberation, insight, forethought, or knowledge. I then shift my attention to the subtitle of the second chapter and ask myself, what may Fanon have meant by the strength and the weakness of spontaneity? Of course, I had to reread and meditate on the chapter several times before it began to hit me. The strength of spontaneity, which I term is objective aspect, is its positive or progressive character, action that's self-motivated or unrestrained by external forces. The weakness of spontaneity, which I term its subjective aspect, is evidence when the action is taken without sufficient deliberation or knowledge, without sufficient development or consciousness and conscious direction, coherent or comprehensive direction, which coordinates the movement as a whole. It's easy to notice that although Fanon often points, especially in the earlier stage, to the people's violence as impatient, spontaneous, and intuitive, he portrays this action in its objective aspect as a manifestation of the strength of spontaneity. This comes across in one paragraph fairly clear. Here we go. But it may happen that the country people, in spite of the slight hold that the Nationalist Party have over them, playing a decisive part either in the process of the maturing of the national consciousness or through working in with the action of nationalist parties, or less frequently by substituting themselves purely and simply for the sterility of the parties. However, for every reference or example of the strength of spontaneity, there are 2 or 3 references, for example, of spontaneity's weaknesses. A weakness which Fanon discusses primarily in the reference to the character and activity of the leaders, the bourgeois nationalist parties, or the intellectuals. The weakness of spontaneity, i.e., the weakness of the decolonization process, is revealed when the so-called leaders and or the intellectuals fail to make an analysis of colonialism and capitalism from a revolutionary, i.e., proletarian perspective, rather than using the bourgeois models of political and social science and suggesting reformist solutions. It's also seen in the failure of these forces to put themselves, quote, to school with the people, in other words, to put at the people's disposal the intellectual and technical capital that they have snatched when going through the colonial universities. If these forces truly have the people's interests at heart, then they should go to the people and help to prepare them to lead the struggle and to govern themselves. They should help the people to shape the vision of the new society, the a vision developed as they challenge and critique the capitalist colonialist world. I almost went to the second page. The new condition, the new condition that helps to open new lines of action and which bears most directly upon the issues of spontaneity, they're those involving the international situation, especially the struggle for other colonized people and the repression of the peoples rising by the colonial system, i.e., colonialism will create spontaneity with bayonets and exemplary floggings. Here we go. Small little words. If someone could reach out to Yusuf and just say, we're just going to have to keep them one at a time, sorry. The enemy is aware of ideological weaknesses. For his analysis, the forces of rebellion, and studies more and more carefully the aggregate enemy which makes up a colonial people. He is also aware of the spiritual instability of certain layers of the population. The enemy discovers the existence side by side with the disciplined and well-organized advance guard of the rebellion, of a mass of men whose participation is constantly at the mercy of their being too long accustomed to psychological wretchedness, humiliation, and irresponsibility. The enemy is ready to pay a high price for the service of this mass. He will create spontaneity with bayonets and exemplary floggings. Dollars of Belgian francs pour into the Congo, while the Madagascar levies against Hova increase, and in Algeria, native recruits who are in fact hostage or enlisted in French forces. The leaders of the rebellion literally see the nation capsizing. Whole tribes join up as Harkans. Harkans were the Algerian mercenaries who joined the French military to fight against their own people, Jesus Christ, and use the modern weapons that they have been given, go on the warpath and invade the territory of the neighboring tribe, which for this occasion has been labeled as the nationalist. That anonymity in battle, so fruitful and grandiose in the first days of the rebellion, undergoes a change. National unity crumbles away. The rising is at a decisive turning of the way. Now the political education of the masses is seen to be a historic necessity. Back to the text. Thank you. With regards to the latter, Fanon shapes the context by first rephrasing the question that he first poses. But let us return to that atmosphere of violence, that violence which is just under the skin. We have seen that in its process towards maturity, many leads are attached to it to control it and show it the way out. Yet, in spite of the metamorphoses which the colonial regime imposes upon in a way of tribal or regional quarrels, that violence makes its way forward, and the native identifies his enemy and recognizes the source of all his misfortunes, throwing all the extirpated I can't say the dang word. Okay, I guess I'll go look it up. I thought you were there, Joe.
Uh, is I don't know.
Okay. Hopefully it will let me say it. Be nice.
I think it's exacerbated.
Maybe. Oh my god. Urgh. It skipped like letters for me as I'm looking it up. I think you're right, though. No. Yeah, you're right. Exacerbated might of his hate and anger into this new channel. But how do we pass from the atmosphere of violence to violence in action? What makes the lid blow off?
Hello,
Hello.
brother, can
Not now. We're doing a reading. I'm sorry they keep dropping you. I don't want to do
please, just 1 minute. I need to talk with.
Like we already explained to you, this is a reading.
we're in the middle of a reading right now. I'm sorry. Um
احكي مين انت يا ولد؟
مين الولد اللي بتحكي عنه ولد انت؟
Here's a solution.
انت
Well, you
انت
figure it
مين؟
out in the comments.
sorry everybody, but like please like talk to each other in the comments, please. I'm sorry. The lid blows off when good natives become scared. The Nationalist Party call for public meetings and mass demonstrations, and the agitation which ensues, the coming and going, the listening to speeches, seeing the people assembled in one place with the police all around, the military demonstrations, arrests, and the deportation of the leaders. All this hubbub makes the people think that the moment has come for them to take action. And it's under I'm sorry. And it's under such conditions that, quote, the guns go off by themselves. Colonialist impression follows, but, quote, far from calling a halt to the forward rush of national consciousness, urges it on. Mass slaughter in the colonies at the certain stage of the embryonic development of consciousness increases at that consciousness. I find it striking that here we are talking about guns going off, and Fanon chooses to characterize it as a forward rush of national consciousness. So, in the wave of the repression and the rush of the people's embryonic consciousness, daily life becomes quite simply impossible. You can no longer be a felon, a pimp, or an alcoholic as before, and the recurring terror demystifies the people. At a point of no return is reached as repression engulfs all sectors of the population. Now, once this situation develops, we can say that we witness the manifestation of the strength of spontaneity. However, what happens after the guns go off spontaneously, having guns go off is no guarantee that the embryonic consciousness of the people will continue to develop and to facilitate their assumptions of leadership over the movement and the new society being fought for. Let us now take a look at those forces. Quote, what are the forces which in the colonial period open up new outlets and engender new aims for violence of colonized peoples? In the first place, there are the political parties and the intellectuals or commercial elites. There is also the peasantry and the colonialist bourgeoisie. We've already seen how the colonialists create spontaneity with their repression of the people. They also create and or take advantage of existing spontaneity by introducing the idea of nonviolence and by encouraging a compromise solution, which signifies to the intellectuals and economic elites of the colonized country that the bourgeoisie has the same interests as them. The spontaneous rise of the people and the existence of other national liberation struggles modifies the approach of the colonialists to then set out to capture the vanguard, to turn the movement of liberation towards the right, and to disarm the people. Now we're going to go to a little bit of the things. Here we go. A colonized people is not is not alone. In spite of all the colonialism can do, its frontier remains open to new ideas and echoes from the world outside. It discovers that violence is in the atmosphere, that it is here and there burst out, and here and there sweeps away the colonialist regime. The same violence which fulfills for the native a role that is not simply inflammatory, but also cooperative. The great victory of the Vietnamese people at Dien Bien Phu is no longer, strictly speaking, a Vietnamese victory. Since July 1954, the question which the colonized people have asked themselves has been, what must be done to bring about another Dien Bien Phu? How can we manage it? Not a single colonized individual could ever again doubt the possibility of a Dien Bien Phu. The only problem was how best to use the forces at their disposal, how to organize them, and when to bring them into action. This encompassing violence does not work upon the colonized people only. It modifies the attitude of the colonialists who become aware of the manifold of Dien Bien Phu. This is why a veritable panic takes hold of the colonialist government in turn. Their purpose is to capture the vanguard, to turn the movement of liberation towards the right, and to disarm the people quick. Disarm the people quick. Let's decolonize the Congo before it turns into another Algeria. Vote the constitutional framework of all African. Create a French communette. Renovate the same communette. But for God's sake, let's decolonize quick. And they decolonize at such a rate that they impose independence on, oh my gosh, Ho Phient Bonien. That's a person. To the strategy of Dien Bien Phu, defined by the colonized people. The colonialists reply by the strategy of encirclement, based on the respect of the sovereignty of states. Okay, where are we at? Doing good. I'm feeling good today. I'm feeling good. I think my reading's all right today. Towards this end of dislocating or creating diversions around an upward thrust of nationalism, the colonialists take advantage of the ideological weakness and social division among the people. And now I'm back to reading. And the oppressor who never loses a chance of setting the inwards against each other will be extremely skillful in using the arrogance and incomprehensions which are the weakness of the lumpen proletariat. If this available reserve of human effort is not immediately organized by the forces of rebellion, it will find itself fighting as hired soldiers side by side with colonial troops in Algeria. It is the lumpen proletariat which furnishes the Harkis, and Mazalists. In Angola, it supplied the road opener, who nowadays precedes the Portuguese armed columns. In the Congo, we find once more the lumpen proletariat in regional manifestation in Kassia and Katanga, while the Leopoldville, the Congo enemies made use of it to organize spontaneous masses meeting against Lubumba. Back to the thing. As we look at the roles of the bourgeois nationalist parties, we should note that Fanon is not questioning the principles of the party, but rather the makeup of their leaders and the nature of their followings. This note is for those who, for whatever reason, don't yet appreciate the need for the role of the structural organization for the people to use as both weapons in the struggle against oppression and as tools of the construction of the new society. To begin with, quote, the characteristic features of certain political structures is that they proclaim abstract principles by refraining from issuing definite commands. The entire action of these nationalist political parties during the colonial period, because they modeled themselves on those parties and principles of the colonialist bourgeoisie and its worldview, its actions of the electoral type in stirring the philosophical political dissertations on the themes of the rights of the peoples to self-determination, the rights of peoples to the freedom from hunger and human dignity, and the unceasing affirmation of the principles one person, one vote. The national political parties never lay stress upon the necessity for a trial of armed strength for the good reason that their objective is not the radical overthrowing of the system. Who's in here? All right. The pacifists and the legalists, they are in fact partisan of order, the new neo-colonial order. But to the colonialist bourgeoisie, they put bluntly enough the demands which to them is the main one, giving us more power. On the specific question of violence, the elite are ambiguous. They are violent in their words and reformist in their attitudes. When the nationalist political party says something, they make quite clear that they do not really think it. I hope we said enough about violence so that as you read passages like the one above, you'll know that the opposition of the bourgeois nationalists to violence is an opposition of any form of fundamental change in the system of neocolonialism, colonialism, imperialism, capitalism, and patriarchy. Violence to them is any talk about all power really being in the hands of the people. It's any threat to their interest and to the interests of their capitalist masters. As you read, you should try to picture any and all individuals or groups, any voiced positions that seem to fit the bill or that can be accurately characterized as narrow bourgeois nationalism, reformist, post-neocolonialist, as representatives of the intellectuals or commercial elite. Farrakhan or Jesse, Manning Marble, Cornel West, or Skip Gates. What about some of the other persons or groups that talk about self-determination or empowerment and sometimes even use the word liberation, but they really think assimilation or parity or pluralism, or as is common these days, a bourgeois-oriented multiculturalism that what they're saying is give us more power. The parties show a deep distrust towards the people of the rural areas and pass the same unfavorable judgment upon them as the settlers. They fail to direct their propaganda towards the rural masses, and they don't try to organize them or to use existing structures and give them a nationalist or progressive character. They do not go out to find the mass of the people. They do not put their theoretical knowledge to the service of the people. As the people spontaneously engage the colonial system, the bourgeois nationalist parties make the most of the manna, but do not attempt to organize the rebellion. They do not send leaders into the countryside to educate the people politically or to increase their awareness or put the struggle into a higher level. The difference in rhythm continues after independence, precisely because the people now at the head of affairs do not explain to the people as a whole during the colonial period that what were the aims of the party, the national trends, or the problems of international politics. Ironically, the reformist activity and bourgeois character of nationalist parties indirectly takes the progressive twist because in their speeches they give a name to the nation. In this way, the people's demand are given shape. There is, however, no definite subject matter on no political or social program. There is a vague outline or skeleton, which is nevertheless national in form. What we describe as minimum requirements. The politicians who make speeches and who write in the nationalist newspaper make the people's dreams. They avoid the actual overthrowing of the state, but in fact they introduce into their readers or hearers unconsciousness the terrible ferment and subversion, and the imagination is let loose outside the bounds of the colonial order. Consideration of the intellectuals should begin at where Fanon first mentions them, i.e., as the masses begin to vomit up bourgeois values. The phenomenon is ordinarily masked because of the action of certain intellectuals, and as the masses demand, quote, that the last shall be first. That the last shall be first. The intellectuals bring variance to the petition. We've already noted the tendency of intellectuals to contribute to the development of spontaneity by their fetish for organization and their focus upon the immediate environment rather than upon the movement as a whole, and their failure to make a reasoned study of colonial system and of their own social structure. Here we go. In order to assimilate and to experience the oppressor's culture, the native has had to leave certain of his intellectual possessions in pawn. These pledges include his adoption of the form of thought of the colonialist bourgeoisie. Thus, there is very easily brought into being a kind of class of, of franchise slaves, or slaves who are individually free, that the intellectual demands is the right to multiply, emancipate the emancipated, and the opportunity to organize a genuine class of emancipated citizens. And I got my first appeal. I have to appeal this. Jesus. Took them long enough, huh? On the other hand, the mass of the people have no intentions of standing by and watching individuals increase their chance of success. What they demand is not the settler position of status, but the settler place. The immense majority of the natives want the settler's farm. For them, there is no question of entering into competition with the settler. They want to take his place. Now go back a few pages in these meditations to my mention of George Curry and Skip Gates, especially Gates' stated aim to bring more black people into the middle class. Yeah, that's them. The franchise slaves who want to multiply their class. The elites of the colonial countries, those slaves set free, when at the head of the movement, inevitably end up by producing an, oh my gosh, what's that word? Oh my gosh.
That's what we should look it up because I don't know what it means.
Me neither. Do. It's a conflict. Come on. There we go. I'm glad I got my pad. VRSATZ. What is this? It's an artificial, inferior, or substitute product often used to place something superior, genuine, or rare. Okay, let me look at what it says, conflict. Let's see, hold on. Ezra conflict refers to using an inferior substitution or artificial methods to fighting wars. Okay, yeah. I.e., oh, there it is, i.e. artificial or inferior substitute. The truth is that and it's spelled ERSATZ. There you go. The truth is that they never make any really appeal to the colonized people. They never mobilize them in concrete terms. Of course, there are individuals within the bourgeoisie classes who break from the class orientation and begin to make a contribution to the formation of a coherent and deliberate program. Fanon first mentions this tendency within the context of conditions which favor a backward surge of intellectuals towards bases grounded in the people, and an eradication of the superstructure built by these intellectuals from the bourgeois colonialist environment. When such intellectuals begin to, we're doing good. Let me look ahead real quick. All right, we might end part 3, so we might end this. Okay, cool. When intellectuals begin to live among the people, they too begin to vomit up bourgeois values, and individualism disappears, and they adopt the method of communal self-criticism. They abandon the habits of calculation, of unwanted silence, and mental reservations, and the spirit of concealment. Fanon picks up the same theme at. Obviously, there are to be found at the core of political parties and among their leaders certain revolutionaries who deliberately turn their backs upon the farce of national independence, but very quickly their questionings, their energy and their anger obstruct the party's machine, and these elements are gradually isolated and then quite simply brushed aside at this moment, as if there exists a dialectical concomitance. The colonialist police will fall upon them with no security in the towns, avoided by the militants of their former party and rejected by its leaders. These undesirables, firebrands, will be sustained in country districts. Then it is that they will realize bewilderedly that the peasant masses catch on to what they have to say immediately, and without delay ask them the question to which they have not yet prepared the answer: when do we start? These left petty bourgeois elements haven't prepared an answer to the question, because despite their antagonism towards the right bourgeois elements, they too have traditionally ignored the masses and failed to analyze their own social structure and develop a coherent plan. It's here that Fanon places this theme within the context of the decisive intervention of the people, i.e., in certain circumstances, the country people are going to intervene in decisive fashion, both in the struggle for national liberation and in the way that the future nation marks out for itself. This is a fundamentally important phenomenon, and he proposes to study it in detail, as will we. Fanon sets the stage over the next several paragraphs with the more detailed description of the process that was initially noted at. And here the focus is clearly upon the phenomenon of spontaneity. We shouldn't be surprised to learn that there are two wills at play: the contradiction between progressive and reactionary tendencies within the party, though again both tendencies have neglected to involve the masses, which reflect the broader contradiction within the movement and among the people as a whole. Fanon uses the term legalists and illegalists, although other terms could be used to describe the opposing tendencies. Let's read what Fanon says. Okay. We have seen that inside the Nationalist Party, the will to break colonialism is linked with another quite different will, that of coming to a friendly agreement with it. Within these parties, the two possesses will sometimes continue side by side. In the first place, when the intellectual elements have carried out a prolonged analysis of a true nature of colonialism and of the international situation, they will begin to criticize their party's lack of ideology and the poverty of its tactics and strategies. They began to question their leaders ceaselessly on critical points. What is nationalism? What sense do you give to this word? What is the meaning? Dependency for what? And in the first place, how do we propose to achieve it? They ask these questions and at the same time require that the problems of the mythology should be vigorously tackled. They are ready to suggest that electoral resources should be supplemented by all other means. After the first skirmishes, the official leaders speedily depose of this effervescence, which they are quickly to label as childish. But since these demands are not simply effervescence, nor the signs of immaturity, the revolutionary elements which subscribe to them will rapidly be isolated. The official leaders, draped in their years of experience, will pitilessly disown these adventurers and anarchists. Quote, the party machine shows itself opposed to any innovation. The revolutionary minority finds itself alone, confronted with leaders who are terrified and worried about the idea that they could be swept away by the maelstrom whose nature, force, or direction they cannot even imagine. The second process concerns the main leaders of the revolutionary minority, or their second in command, who are marked out for police repression under the colonialists. It must be emphasized that these men have come to the head of the party by their untiring work, their spirit of sacrifice, and the most exemplary patriotism. Such men who have worked, oh my gosh, another fucking, all right, I bet people on the outside. Jesus Christ. Such men who have worked their way up from the bottom are often unskilled workers, seasonal laborers, or even sometimes chronically unemployed. For them, the fact of militating in national party is not simply taking part in politics. It is choosing the only means whereby they can pass from the status of an animal to that of a human being. Such men, hampered by the excessive legalism of the party, will show within the limits of the activities of which they are responsible a spirit of initiatives, courage, and a sense of an importance of the struggle which marks them out almost automatically as a target for colonialist repression. Arrested, condemned, tortured, finally amnestied, they use their time in prison to clarify their ideas and strengthen their determination. Through hunger strikes and the violent brotherhood of the prison's quicklime, they live on, hoping for their freedom, looking on as an opportunity to start an armed struggle, but at one and the same time, outside the prison walls, colonialism attacks from all sides is making advances to the nationalist moderates. So we can observe the process whereby the rupture occurs between the illegal and legal tendencies in the party. The illegal minority is made to feel that they are undesirable and are shunned by the people that matter. But the repression of these wayward elements intensify as the legal party draws nearer to colonialism and attempts to modify it from the inside. The illegal minority thus finds itself in a historical blind alley. Where are we at? Okay, here we are. The left begins to raise questions about the movement, ideology, strategy, and methods. They begin to suggest the use of all other means, which we should understand to include armed forms of struggle, but only as one among all other means. Here, coherent program means one in which all elements of social life are systematically connected and that struggle on each of the fronts are coordinated. The right wants to compromise with colonialism, to change the system from within, as we often hear it said. They claim that joining, say, the Democratic or Republican parties will solve the problem. Even a third or independent party that plays by the rules of the oppressive state is held out as a solution. So the intellectual elements, and the militants combined to form a new party. They declare a new line, Black Power, or the claim to open the armed front or to launch a FOCO, FOCO. They end up going underground or in the countryside or the mountains, while also realizing that activity in the urban centers alone won't be sufficient to overthrow colonialism, as they join the people who are rebels by instinct. Spontaneous actions soon follows. Hold on, we're almost done. We're doing good. We should pay particular attention to where we're giving one of the reasons why in the beginning there's a veritable triumph for the cult of spontaneity. A one-sided analysis of the thought and practice of the bourgeoisie parties and their leaders has caused a rejection of all politics, rather than a righteous rejection of reactionary politics through thought, and practice. A new left now substitutes its own superficial lines for that of their former comrades, which, in practice and over the long run, proves to be just as dangerous as the line that they repudiate. It's right in essence. The next paragraph captures this, as we see that there's still no program, and we see the circumstances under which spontaneity is king. And revolutionary politics are abandoned from the art of war. Every success confirms their hostility towards what in the future they will describe as mouthwash, word spinning, blather, and fruitless agitation. They feel a positive hatred for the politics of demagoguery, and that is why in the beginning we observe the invariable triumph for the cult of spontaneity. They hold one doctrine only: to act in such a way that the nation may exist. There is no program, there is no speeches, no resolution, no political trends. During this period, spontaneity is king, initiatives is localized. On every hill, a government in miniature is formed and takes over power. Everywhere, in the valleys and in the forest, in the jungles and in the villages, we find a national authority. Each man or woman brings the nation to life by his or her actions, and is pledged to ensure its triumph in their localities. We are dealing with a strategy of immediacy that is both radical and totalitarian. The aim and program of each locally constituted group is local liberation. If the nation is everywhere, then she is here. One step further, and only here is she found. Tactics are mistaken for strategies. The art of politics is simply transformed into the art of war. The political militant is a rebel to fight the war and to take part of politics, and the two things become one and the same. Back up. The spontaneous action sparks a widespread feeling of solidarity and accomplishment as the people wills itself to sovereignty. However, the enemy launches an all-out offensive, military, political, and social, which calls the people's euphoria into question. Soon, the spontaneous impetuosity is condemned to self-repudiation. Not only with regard to the mobility of guerrilla warfare. The leaders of the rising, hold on a second. The leaders of the rising realized that the various groups must be enlightened, that they must be educated and indoctrinated, and that an army and a central authority must be created. Those leaders who have fled from the useless political activities of the towns rediscover politics, no longer as a way of lulling people to sleep, not as a means of mystification, but as the only method of intensifying the struggle and preparing the people to undertake the governing of their country clearly and lucidly. They discovered that the success of the struggle presupposes clear objectives, a definite methodology, and above all, the need for the people to realize that their unorganized efforts can only be temporary, dynamic, and that the struggle can't be won, and you won't change human beings if you forget to raise the standard of consciousness of the rank and file. Fanon now points again to the enemy's creation of spontaneity by taking advantage of the people's ideological and social weaknesses and asserting that the political education of the masses is seen to be a historic necessity. What happens to all the solidarity, the euphoria, the feeling of accomplishment as we thought? We are riding the high tide. That spectacular volunteer, spontaneous movement, which meant to lead the colonized people to supreme sovereignty at one fell swoop, at certainty, which you had that all portions of the nation would be carried along with you at the same speed and led onward by the same light, that strength which gives you hope, all now are seen in the light of experience to the symptoms of a very great weakness, while the native thought that he could pass without transition from the status of colonized person to that of a self-governed citizen of an independent nation, while he grasps at the mirage of his muscles on own immediacy. He's made no real progress along the road to knowledge. His consciousness remains rudimentary. Now, go back and read that again, because I'm sure that at least some of you have failed to notice the key IG. What are the symptoms of the very great weaknesses? What is the weaknesses? What kind of transition is necessary? More and more I come to believe that we periodically find ourselves having to start from scratch, not because our job is hard, but merely because we don't know what our job is. Go back now to the close of chapter 2, I think paragraph 57. You won't change human beings. That's our job. That's the aim of the national and social revolution. Although we're only 2 chapters, that's our, okay, yeah. Although we're only 2 chapters into Wretched, if you haven't firmly grasped this point yet, then you need to stop here, go back to the first page and start over. In fact, you also need to go back to the first page of these meditations and start over. Many of us really need to pick up on the key in the last section of, as Fanon points out, the period as one in which the people oppose their own duality to that of the settler. That they do so is a symptom of an ideological weaknesses, characteristics of spontaneity, which Fanon shed lights on. That is radicalism. Well, it's racialism. Won't sustain a war for national and social revolution, and that such a war should be waged to allow racialism to triumph. People who hold and depend upon racialism don't yet fully realize their own humanity, and among other things, they easily fall into the trap of the settlers' treatment of them as humans within the colonial context. The native is starved for anything, is so starved for anything at all that will turn him into a human being. His consciousness is so precarious and dim that it is affected by the slightest spark of kindlessness. The message. What?
It's not kindlessness, it's kindliness.
Kindliness, yeah. The message for all of us is that explanation is very necessary, and that the people must see where they are going and how they are going to get there. The message is in the last paragraph of this chapter and in the last paragraph of the second chapter. We get images of what happens if spontaneity is overcome and what happens if it is not. If spontaneity is overcome, then the left, pretty bourgeois forces will commit suicide and become new as one of the people. The people will become totally responsible for the governing and development of their society. If spontaneity is not overcome, then independence will become a farce. And that's the end of part 2. And we'll start part 3 tomorrow, where it says the deconstruction of race. We're going to go over about the exercises. Did Fanon regard race as a minor term? The key category of race and class. Fanon on race, racism, class, and the struggle of socialism meditations. Thoughts of the deconstruction of race. We'll start there. About this exercise. All right, so we stopped at 2:42 with 4 minutes left over. If anybody would like to come up and have a conversation about spontaneity and what we've learned.
So I think that it talks about how they keep forgetting the masses, and that's really important, that they've got to remember the masses when they're doing this, and that intellectuals, I forgot, it was something about intellectuals being able to be very easily bourgeoisie.
To get their status quo and everything, yes. The intellectuals have to do a class suicide in order to be amongst the people, to be able to help the character of spontaneity to become more organized and have more objectives and plans on how to do the thing. So yeah. Hello, chicken strips. If you're still here. I don't know if you're still here. But yeah. And spontaneity is a phenomenon that develops in the beginning, right? And the spontaneity needs to transform into something different, in a character that seeks to like build the mass base, build revolutionary armies, and build like those things to have the principles on how to engage tactically and through strategies, the liberation process and decolonization effort. They also talked about how like the state was feared of the decolonization effort due to the spontaneity. So they said decolonize quickly, and they did that falseness of decolonization where it went in from colonialism into neocolonialism. So they never really got rid of it. They just did the reforming, because he talks about how the reformists destroy the ways. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yes.
Hello,
yes.
chicken. What were you gonna say?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So, spontaneity. Please go investigate why spontaneity has 2 aspects. It has the objective and the subjective, and how spontaneity can turn into a revolutionary purpose, and how spontaneity can turn into a reactionary, counter-revolutionary purpose. Those are the 2 things. Spontaneity can end up in those 2 directions. Is what I'm gathering. So it's very important. All right. Anything else? Anybody have anything else before I close out? Doesn't look like it. Food, not bombs. Sweet. Go ahead, Joe.
No, I'm saying no. It doesn't look
Okay.
like it.
All right, then, everybody. We'll go ahead and close it out. I don't know if Chicken is going live. They took a break yesterday. Are you going live, Chicken, tonight? Or are you taking a break? And I heard you fall asleep on a live. I heard you. I heard you sleeping on a live. Yes, you're going live. I heard you sleeping on your live earlier. Just yeah, Doodley was there too. All right, everybody. I love y'all. Have a good night. Please, please take care of yourself. Find a local group to organize with. Find ways to engage with community and the masses. Good night.